As you know, our next panel is on the topic of B corporations and other suitable business models for social impact and social entrepreneurship. I'd like to quickly get started by introducing our panel moderator, Mr. John Montgomery. He's the founder of Montgomery and Hanson, and he's a practicing lawyer. He is the co-chair, or was the co-chair of the working group behind California's benefit corporation legislation, and won a California Lawyer of the Year award from California Bar in 2012 for his work on this topic. He is also the author of Great from the Start: How Conscious Corporations Attract Success. He currently works with leaders to optimize their effectiveness in operating from the heart. Please help me welcome Mr. John Montgomery.
Okay, first order of business, is the microphone working? Yes. Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you all for coming. We're running behind, so I'm going to quickly introduce our panel. To my left, my immediate left, is Elizabeth Dodson. She's the Director of Grant Making and Grantee Impact for SV2. To her left is Clara Brenner, the CEO and founder of Tummel, an urban ventures accelerator. And finally, Davis Scott at the far left, CEO and founder of Cotopaxi, an outdoor equipment manufacturer. And Davis is also his company is a certified B Corp and a benefit corporation. And like me, Davis worked on the Utah benefit corporation legislation. So welcome, everybody.
So far away.
So we'll scoot in. Okay, so I'm going to try to frame the discussion today. You all are part of probably the most amazing transformation in business since New York invented free incorporation and limited liability in 1811 and started the Industrial Revolution, or the age of industry. We are experiencing a global shift in consciousness, and I think in business this is manifest as a change in orientation from a monomaniacal focus on profit to a triple bottom line orientation. And I think impact investing, conscious capitalism, the benefit corporation, the certified B corporation movement are all evidence of this global shift in consciousness. And all of you are going to have a choice between economic paradigms, and this choice is really coming up quickly. So to begin, the new paradigm is characterized by businesses that are organized to do good. And I think the benefit corporation, which is the first corporate vehicle that is engineered with a social and environmental conscience in addition to a pecuniary one, is going to be the leading agent or vehicle for this new paradigm. The old paradigm is characterized by our beloved corporation, which is a 500-year-old form that has served us very, very well. But this corporate form is designed to maximize profit for shareholders while externalizing as many of the negative consequences of corporate behavior on society and the environment as possible. And this corporate entity has no legal architecture for a social and environmental conscience. So briefly, a little bit of background on the benefit corporation. Maryland was the first state to adopt benefit corporation legislation in 2010. Things don't change very quickly in the legal business, but things have changed practically the speed of light in the law. We now have 26 states in the United States that have adopted benefit corporation legislation, including the in addition to the District of Columbia. The most significant development was that Delaware in 2013 adopted benefit corporation legislation. Delaware is the bellwether corporate jurisdiction in the world. Approximately 1/6 of all corporations in America are incorporated in Delaware, and the world looks to Delaware for thought leadership in corporate law. And the general architecture of the benefit corporation is, and I'm going to make all of you experts in this forum, 3 characteristics. There's a public purpose, there's accountability, and there's transparency. Those are the 3 defining qualities. So the company has a public purpose. It measures its provision of that public purpose against a third-party standard, and it reports the progress towards meeting that public purpose to the public and its shareholders. That's the general legal framework. Now, Delaware is going to be the de facto legal standard in benefit corporations. And of course, Delaware does things its own way. They have called the benefit corporation in Delaware a public benefit corporation. So briefly, a Delaware benefit corporation, public benefit corporation, has to provide a public benefit. It's got to operate in a sustainable and responsible manner. And the most significant change of all, I think, is that the fiduciary duties of the directors change. There's a 3-part balancing test in Delaware. So directors will go from juggling 1 ball, maximizing profit, to juggling 3. And the first ball is the pecuniary interests of shareholders, which is business as usual. The second ball is the interests of those stakeholders affected by corporate action, i.e. society and the environment, vendors and suppliers, employees, customers, et cetera. And the third is the chosen public purpose of the corporation. So that's kind of the outline. Now, there's a lot of confusion between a benefit corporation and a certified B Corp. So, so what is a B Corp or a certified B Corp? Well, the leading third-party standard to assess a benefit corporation's provision of a material positive impact on society and the environment is B-Lab, which is a not-for-profit organization's certified B Corporation assessment standard. Companies that pass this standard are affectionately known as B Corps or certified B Corps. And this causes a great amount of confusion in the marketplace because benefit corporations or public benefit corporations are also affectionately referred to as B Corps. So it's really important to get the nomenclature down and understand the distinction between a certified B Corporation, which is an entity that can be a partnership, a limited liability company, or a corporation that's passed an assessment, and a benefit corporation, which is a creature of statute. One is a term of art, one is a legal term. So that's the lay of the land. Now, history is in the making, folks. We have 2 publicly traded certified B corporations, Rally Software out of Boulder and Natura out of Brazil. Etsy, the online marketplace for unique goods, recently filed its S1. They will be the 3rd certified B corporation. Now, what's really fascinating about this prospectus is that in the process of its certification, Etsy agreed to become a Delaware public benefit corporation. And it's going to be fascinating to watch in the registration process and beyond whether Etsy goes through with its commitment to become the world's first publicly traded public benefit corporation. And whoever is the first publicly traded, listed benefit corporation is going to have an enormous thought leadership position globally in the realm of sustainable and responsible business. I don't know if you all remember the fanfare that Google received back when it declared that it stood for do no evil. Imagine what goodwill will accrue to the first publicly traded company that makes a legal commitment to operate in a responsible and sustainable manner. That company will immediately become the global standard bearer for responsible corporate citizenship. Very exciting times. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. Let's see.
A little transition.
Transition.
So we'll be kind of driving backwards on those slides, so that'll be a test of my skills. So thank you, John. I think John just talked about some really exciting developments in the world of entrepreneurs who are pursuing both economic value and social good. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some real-life examples of organizations that are doing that, both their approach to their business models and really briefly some of the legal options. First, what am I talking about when I say the business model? The thing I think about are kind of 3 points. The first is, what is their model for producing impact? In other words, how are they producing social good? The second thing I think about is, what's their financial model? What is their economic engine? And then the third thing is, how do those play together? This idea has emerged over a number of years of the hybrid ideal. There's a great article about this from 2011 in SSIR. And the authors talk about the fact that they did a series of interviews with social entrepreneurs, and this idea of the hybrid ideal came up. And the hypothetical organization that meets the hybrid ideal is fully integrated in that everything it does produces both social value and revenue. In reality, of course, social entrepreneurs are across the spectrum of integration. Everything from entrepreneurs who kind of are close to the ideal in both that their product or service and the way they're delivering that product and service creates revenue and social value. And then it goes to, toward the other end of the spectrum where revenue generation and social value are linked, but not necessarily as fully integrated. There are tons of examples. This is a tiny subset, and I'll walk through just a handful of them to kind of show you how this is playing out. One is Living Goods. This is a former SB2 grantee, and their model is to sell quality of life, health, and welfare products to the poor in Uganda. So they're producing social value through the product itself. They also have a distribution channel that involves micro-franchising to local folks in Uganda who are selling the products to their neighbors, Avon style. So that in and of itself, that distribution chain is also creating social value through creating a living for those micro-entrepreneurs in Uganda. Another option, you've probably heard of Revolution Foods. They're another example of an organization where the product itself is deriving social value and is also their economic engine. Revolution Foods is dedicated to commit to providing healthy, whole food to kids, regardless of their income level, which is key to their mission. The way they do that is providing these pre-made meals that they sell to public schools, and they also are pursuing direct distribution channels everywhere from Walmart to Whole Foods. So they're another example of an organization where both their revenue engine and their social impact engine are united in this product. On the other hand, we have another food example. Hope you're not too hungry. Alter Eco, which is the products they sell aren't necessarily a social good in and of themselves. So they sell chocolate, which I do tell my husband is a social good, but they sell chocolate, rice, quinoa, things like that. They're dedicated to producing social impact through their production approach, which is to work directly with farmer co-ops in a fair trade manner. They also pursue 100% carbon offsets of their shipping impacts, and they're really dedicated to sustainable packaging, including a cool compostable chocolate wrapper. Similarly, Juma Ventures is another example of an organization where the product or service itself isn't necessarily a social good. They operate concession stands, but the way they pursue that operation does produce social value. Juma gets about 1/3 of its revenue through these concession stand operations at large stadiums. You've probably seen their kids. They operate them with at-risk youth. They provide those kids with training, savings program, and also academic coaching all the way through college. And then the last example I'll talk about is one that I consider a little closer to the traditional corporate philanthropy model. Warby Parker, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, they sell, some laughs for that one. They sell glasses, and for every pair of glasses that the consumer buys, they make a contribution to Vision Spring, which is a nonprofit that works with entrepreneurs internationally, micro-entrepreneurs essentially, to provide vision wear to their community members. So basically, they produce money, and then they give some of it away. Now, you might ask, Elizabeth, why do I care about this, about the level of integration? I think one of the main things you'll read about in this conversation is the idea of trade-offs. And the idea that the more integrated your model for producing social impact with your model for producing revenue, there are arguably fewer trade-offs you'll have to make as you scale between those two objectives. One example is Revolution Foods. They depend for scale upon reaching more and more public schools with their pre-made meals. Right now they serve, for instance, about half of the San Francisco Unified School District. They'll only be successful in doing that if they continue to keep the cost of the meals affordable. And keeping the cost of the meals affordable serves their social mission, which is making healthy foods available to kids from all income levels. So very briefly, what does this then tell you about a legal structure to pursue for your social enterprise? The reality is, I didn't lead with legal structure because we see organizations, I think, across this spectrum of integration, adopting a variety of legal structures. The first is your traditional nonprofit structure. Juma Ventures and Living Goods are both organized as nonprofits. They're a corporation or LLC and have pursued tax-exempt status. Another option is a nonprofit with a for-profit subsidiary. I didn't talk about Mozilla, but they're right up the street, and that's how they're structured. Benefit corporations, L3Cs, as John talked about, this allows you to bake into your corporate structure both the pursuit of revenues and the pursuit of social good. Alter Eco is an example of this. And then you have your traditional for-profit organization that has found another way to hold itself accountable for impact. My understanding is that both Revolution Foods and Warby Parker are organized as traditional corporations, but they've kind of taken the steps they need to in terms of their governance and other practices to become certified B Corps. There's a variety of questions you might consider when determining your legal structure. You should talk with a lawyer. First and foremost, you should figure out your business model. How are you creating impact? How are you creating revenue? How do they play together? Another question to consider is, what is your primary motivation? Are you really just adamantly dedicated to supporting low-income kids through college? Or are you primarily motivated by profit? Or is it some combination of the two? And last, among other considerations, is where's the money going to come from? Both your startup capital and your ongoing revenues. And finally, I'll end us back where John started us with a quote from Jed Emerson, who has done a lot of writing about blended value. I recommend his work. And he talks about the fact that we're really in an age that is kind of post-nonprofit, for-profit distinction, where we need to embrace the fact that all companies create both economic value and social impact. And the question is whether it's good impact or bad impact, and we're optimizing for both. That's kind of it. Do you have slides? Okay. Should we just turn them on? Yeah, there we go.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. My name is Clara Brenner. I'm the co-founder of Tummel, which is an urban ventures accelerator that's based here in San Francisco. I'll try to keep it short because I know we're running low on time, but basically we invest in startups that are looking to solve community problems in cities, and we work with them to help make sure they're building business models that can be replicated in communities across the US. So we'll work with a company like KidAdmit, which is a common application for preschools, HandUp, which is a crowdfunding platform for the homeless, Valor Water Analytics, which is sort of a business intelligence solution for water utilities. They basically take billing data and help the utilities make more responsible financial planning decisions and also decisions around things like conservation. So it really runs the gamut in terms of industry vertical. But we think that these companies all have a couple things in common around sort of solving problems that we think are really important and worth solving. Tummel is based on research that my co-founder Julie and I were doing when we were in business school around for-profit social enterprise. So Julie used to work at Revolution Foods, and I worked for a startup called Fundrise, which crowdfunds dollars from the community to invest in institutional real estate. And we just thought they were awesome. Like, we just thought these companies were incredible. They were having a huge outsized impact on all the cities in which they were operating. But unlike more traditional community organizations, they were scaling really rapidly. I don't think you think of most community nonprofits as being able to rapidly pop up in 20 major municipalities around the US and internationally. And at the time at business school, everyone was like, well, they're just social enterprises. But I don't think that those, well, I know that neither of those companies actively self-identifies as a social enterprise. And we didn't really have any language to describe what they had in common. So first of all, we kind of named the space urban impact entrepreneurship. And second, we kind of embarked on this research around why we aren't seeing more companies just naturally pop up in this space that are solving important community problems, scaling. And we found two primary challenges. The first is seed funding. If you are looking to solve a community problem in a city as a startup, you're less than half as likely as your more traditional peers to secure seed funding. That is a huge, huge disparity. A lot of it has to do with the fact that startups in this space are oftentimes, they have like a physical component to what it is that they're doing. So if you start a bike share, you have to buy a fleet of bikes. If you're the Revolution Foods, you need to physically build culinary centers in order to operate. Or these companies are working in the new economy space like collaborative consumption, in which case more institutional investors really want to see that you have a lot of traction before they're going to take a risk on you. So that's challenge number one. The second challenge is that startups that are looking to solve community problems in cities are about twice as likely as their more traditional entrepreneurial peers to need to connect with civic and government leaders in order to be successful. So the companies that we work with are not looking to sell to government. They're not looking to embed their product or service within government, but they need government help to be successful. So if you're that bike share, you need public space permits in every city in which you're operating. If you're an Uber, which some people define as a community benefit, some don't. But if you're an Uber, you're like breaking every law known to man in every city in which you operate. And it's very complicated. Investors want to see that you can quickly ramp up like this, hockey stick. It's very hard to demonstrate that when every city in which you're operating is basically like starting again. So we have companies that, you know, learn how to operate successfully in San Francisco, and then just going across the bridge to Oakland is like starting again because it's a completely different regulatory landscape and it's a completely different set of decision makers. So it's kind of a long way of saying that's what we use to base Tummel on. So our program is specifically focused on seed investing in startups that are looking to solve community problems and working with them on their regulatory challenges. So they work with the director of public policy from Airbnb to figure out their sort of public policy strategy. They work with the chief technology officer of Lyft to kind of say, okay, when you're scaling your back end from 1 city to 5 cities, what does that look like? That's sort of the way we're structured. To quickly touch upon the sort of legal aspect of what we do, which is obviously the topic of the panel, we only invest in for-profits, so C Corps, LLCs, and public benefit corporations. And the reason for that is we're really looking for scale. Nonprofits, we are a nonprofit, we love nonprofits, but nonprofits don't scale. I think there was a study recently that identified 200,000 nonprofits that have started in the US since 1970, and something like 144 have ever, over that whole period, been able to achieve more than $50 million in annual revenue. More money equals more impact. If you have money and you are growing your business, you are going to impact more people's lives. So we're specifically trying to focus on the types of enterprises that we think can successfully grow. The challenge is really that the impact space is super nascent. There aren't a lot of investors out there. I think the Global Impact Investing Network identified, I think it was like $1.3 billion in sort of seed stage impact dollars that are out there. That's less than Uber raised this past year. There just aren't a lot of dollars. So the real focus of our work is to try and seed the market with startups that have a core mission at the heart of what it is that they're doing, whether they self-identify as social or not, and position them to secure both impact dollars as well as more institutional tech investment.
Excellent.
So I think the reason that we're all here is because we care about making the world a better place. And so I'm honored to be up here with other people that feel the same way and to be here with you guys. And I'll just tell you a little bit about kind of my path to creating Cotopaxi, which is a public benefit corporation. The first time I remember feeling empathy towards another person was as a 4-year-old. And my family had left the United States, and we moved to the Dominican Republic. And I remember driving to our home for the first time from the airport, and I remember being glued to the window, seeing children my same age, 3, 4, 5 years old, standing on the sides of the street completely naked. And it was shocking to me. Even as a 4-year-old, I knew something was wrong. And I ended up spending the rest of my childhood and early teenage years living in the developing world, and have also spent about half of my adult life also living in the developing world. And so this is it's something I've become passionate about. When I was an undergrad, this is in 2001, I went to Peru, and I was doing an internship for a nonprofit. And when I was there, I was in a little city called Cusco for about a week as I went to Machu Picchu. And in this little city, I met a little boy, a shoe-shining kid. And as I was sitting on a park bench eating, he came up and asked if he could shine my shoes. And I was wearing tennis shoes, so I had to explain that I wasn't interested. But having grown up in Latin America, I immediately ended up connecting with this little boy. And I offered him some of my food. I offered the rest of it to him, and the way he ate it was shocking to me. And I decided that I had to look for this boy every day. So that night, as I ate dinner, I saved some of my food and went and looked for this little boy. His name was Edgar. And it became the highlight of my day every day, finding this little boy. And my last night in Cusco, as I was going back to my hotel room, it was late at night. It was cold. You could see your breath in the air. I stumbled upon Edgar sleeping on the side of the street, and he had his sweater pulled over his knees. And it was heartbreaking to see a little 9-year-old boy having to sleep on the streets. And I woke him up and asked him why he wasn't home. And he told me that someone had stolen his shoe-shining kit, and he knew his father was going to beat him because he was responsible for helping to provide for the family. As a poor college student, I didn't have much, but I gave him the cash that I had. And the next day, as I left Cusco, I was on a bus. And as we were kind of leaving the city, we stopped in front of the main cathedral. There were some steps that kind of went up. I looked out the window, and I saw Edgar. And he saw me, and I just had enough time where I slid open the window of this bus, and he ran next to the bus, waving goodbye to me. And in one arm, he'd bought a bag of candy that he was now selling in the streets for money. So it was hugely impactful for me. It was the kind of thing where I'd gone to Cusco to go see Machu Picchu, but it was actually the memory of this little boy, Edgar, that really dominated my memory of this experience. And I made a commitment on that bus that I would find a way to help kids like Edgar. And I've kind of been on that path since. I've never been, I wasn't really sure how I was supposed to do that or how to do it. When I graduated from undergrad, I started my first business. It was a business called pooltables.com. It's exactly what it sounds like. Built that, and really fun business. Discovered I was passionate about entrepreneurship. It became the largest retailer of pool tables in the U.S. It's a really small industry, so it's not that impressive, but it was really fun. I ended up selling the business, went to business school at the Wharton School, where I started looking for my next opportunity to do something. And I ended up moving down to Brazil and starting a business called baby.com.br, and then another business called dinda.com.br. This became Brazil Startup of the Year in 2012. It was a blast. So we were building an amazing company. At the same time, being back in Brazil, in the developing world, I was able to see, again, this huge disparity of the have and have-nots. And it wore on me. And after a few years, I decided I was ready to go build something different, build something of meaning, where it wasn't just about making money, but it was about finding a way that I could make the world a little bit better. And so I moved back to the US, and I incorporated, the day I moved back to the US, I incorporated the business. And we incorporated as a public benefit corporation against the advice of my attorneys who were helping me, start this new business. They told me I should incorporate first as a C corp, raise money, get the business off the ground, and then convert to a benefit corporation later. But I felt strongly that this was at the core of why I was doing this business. And so I incorporated as the public benefit corporation, and then went out and started fundraising, and was able to raise. We raised a $3 million seed round. I started the business with a co-founder of mine, who's actually here, Stefan Jacob, who we went to business school together, and we put together just an amazing little team. We were the first company to incorporate as a public benefit corporation from inception, and then raise venture capital, which felt great. I loved seeing investors kind of believe. It was shocking. Investors actually have hearts, which I loved seeing. So we launched the business in April of last year, so 11 months ago. The name Cotopaxi it comes from a volcano in Ecuador, one of the highest active volcanoes in the world. I lived there as a kid, and so it has special meaning to me. I used to go backpacking there with my dad. And now we make outdoor gear. Every single piece of gear is tied to a social cause. We actually have a pack called the Cusco, and it raises money for a little shelter that helps street kids just like Edgar. And every single product has its own story. Every jacket, every pack, every water bottle is raising money for a very specific cause that you can read about on the site. So we're super passionate about it. We actually just closed a Series A round. We raised $6.5 million last week or 2 weeks ago. So that's being announced next week publicly. But making some great progress. So thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah, and that's a really significant achievement. The lawyers, investment bankers, venture capitalists, we're in the risk management business, and anything new is generally terrifying to us. And so entrepreneurs like Davis are really like a good Russian icebreaker in the Arctic. They're breaking the trail for other investors to follow, and proving that it's really safe to invest in benefit corporations. So congratulations on your funding. So really briefly, before we turn it over to questions from the audience, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to just describe what their world looks like in 5 years if they realize the full potential of their current enterprise's vision, and then what does the overall business climate look like as well? So Elizabeth?
Sure. So SB2 is a venture philanthropy organization traditionally. For the past 15 years, we've funded social entrepreneurs who are through grants specifically to nonprofits. We're very excited that literally like a week and a half ago, our board approved a pilot impact investment initiative, which will kick off next year with a small pool of money to kind of try it out and get started. So I think for SV2, the goals behind that was to understand that there is just more than ever a variety of tools for social change. And we want to embrace that and make sure that we're looking for the best solution to a problem, kind of agnostic to the form it comes in. I personally believe, and I'm pretty sure that in 5 years and over the long term, there will always be a role for nonprofits. There will always be problems for which it's hard to find market solutions. But at the same time, Clara has a fantastic point, which is that it's also very hard to scale a nonprofit. Increasingly, there are more models for doing that don't involve direct replication. So for instance, sharing best practices and having other organizations replicate your model. At the same time, we've obviously seen the promise of being able to scale through markets. So I think for SV2, and I think for me personally, we're pursuing more of a balanced approach, if you will.
In the next 5 years, I think we're already starting to see this, but I think in general, mission-driven and social impact entrepreneurs are going to become savvier. Frankly, a lot of the time we end up working with companies to just help them focus more on their business metrics. Like a company will come in and pitch us and say, like, we're a social enterprise, period. Like, great, that's great, but what do you do? What are your business metrics? What is your vision? How are you going to get there? I think in general, the space needs to become a lot more technical in terms of the way in which it articulates its ability to scale and frankly be profitable or at least self-sustaining. That's what investors want to see, and I think that's the biggest hurdle for entrepreneurs. I think similarly, investors are starting to get savvier, especially in the more traditional venture space and sort of the tech angel space. So we were just talking about this beforehand, but our whole portfolio, they've gone on to raise millions and millions of dollars just in the last year and a half. 0 of those dollars have come from impact investors. They've come from tech angels, micro VCs, and traditional venture capital. Not because our companies didn't want impact dollars, but because there are very few impact dollars out there, and the ones that are out there are very hard to secure. So I think you're starting to see the more traditional finance space starting to educate themselves on the value of companies that have a mission that isn't necessarily detracting from their ability to be scalable. They just may approach it in a different way. So we were talking about this example of we have a company that's a crowdfunding platform for the homeless. It also happens to be that they are a software as a service platform that sells to nonprofits and other agencies. So for them, they found a lot of investors who were interested in the fact that it was a scalable software as a service platform. It just happened to be serving a really underserved community. So I think both sides of that marketplace are going to start to sort of gravitate towards each other.
I think the next 5 years for us as a business, as Cotopaxi, I'd love for us to become the next Patagonia, an outdoor gear brand designed around this young millennial generation that cares about doing good. We look at great brands like Patagonia or the North Face. They've been around for 50 or 60 years, and so it's been a long time since a brand's really been built around this young millennial generation. So that would kind of be my vision for our business, and for I think the market as a whole. I think we're going to continue to see more and more social entrepreneurs, kind of like we were talking about, that are more savvy. I think Tom Shoes did us all a huge service. They weren't the first ones to have a buy one, give one model. And some people argue whether the effectiveness of Tom Shoes and their giving program, how effective that was to alleviate poverty. But I think what they did, the best thing they did was actually not the shoes they gave out, but it was actually showing that this model can work, where you can do well and do good simultaneously. And so, I definitely took inspiration from them, from Warby Parker. The Warby Parker guys went to school with me. So, being able to see great entrepreneurs build great brands that do good and give back has been inspirational to me, and I hope that that more will continue to follow, and I think that will be the case. So.
Excellent. Okay, I just saw the 2-minute warning. We'll probably go over a little bit, so let's take a couple of questions from the audience. Anybody have? There's a hand in the back with the glasses.
Yeah, they're giving him a microphone.
This is Sachin. I have a question around incorporating public benefit corporation in Delaware online. Is there any good source where you can go online and incorporate your organization as a public benefit in Delaware?
I'm not aware of a good source yet. There are a number of incorporating services that allow you to incorporate online. Many of them lag behind the change in the statutes, and one of the things about the Delaware statute is you need to select a a public purpose among a menu that's set forth in the statute. So it's a little bit of, I'm not sure it's become a cookie cutter commodity service yet.
I could maybe jump in and say there are a couple law firms that have cut, or at least partners within law firms that have kind of made a name for themselves working in the space, and a lot of them offer deferred services. So a number of our companies have become, well, all of them that are public benefit are in Delaware, and I would strongly encourage you, if you're going to become a public benefit corporation, to do it in Delaware if you're looking to pursue more traditional funding afterwards. So if you want to get a name of some of those partners who might be interested in doing deferred services, you can just shoot me an email. It's clara@tumml.org, TUMML.
Thanks. My name is Brian Overland. I'm a student here in the MBA program, and my question is for Davis around raising venture capital for a B Corp. If you could provide a little more color on your investors' perspective on this type of incorporation. They really hammer it into our heads here at the Wharton School that you have to do a Delaware C Corp if you're going to be raising venture capital, and I think an illustration of your approach could be beneficial.
Absolutely. So great question. You definitely, there's a reason why you need to be a Delaware C Corp to raise venture capital, because of the LPs and the requirements that they have by law to invest in that type of entity. The cool thing about the benefit corporation is that you can actually elect to be taxed as a Delaware C Corp or as an S Corp. So we elected to be, we're a Delaware public benefit corporation. We elected to be taxed as a C Corp, which now gives the same, it's the same, as far as an investor is concerned, it's the same. So legally. So their biggest concern is going to be, hey, can you actually run a business and like give away our money at the same time well? I will say no investor, at least to my face, told me that was the reason that they didn't want to invest. I did like being a benefit corporation as part of the conversation, because for me it was a way of filtering the right type of investor. If there's an investor that doesn't want to invest in my business because of that social mission, they're not the right investor for me anyway. So very little pushback from investors. In fact, I'd say none. I never had an investor tell me that they didn't like that. They felt it was an advantage to us, to our brand. It's really kind of core to who we are. Everything from like the product that we sell we tie in the social causes into every part of the product. Inside, if you open up one of the bags, it will, the Kilimanjaro will have a native pattern from Tanzania inside of it. You'll get a handwritten note from actually a refugee living in Salt Lake City, where we're based, telling you thank you for your purchase. And it's the first job these refugees have in the United States. So we try to incorporate the social mission into everything that we do. And I think investors kind of saw that as like a real defensible advantage that we'd have over other brands. So I think when you're approaching investors, you just have to remember, while they may have hearts, they really care about the business working. And so if you can figure out a way to do that and have social good at the same time, then that's what they're really interested in. So.
One more question.
This question is for Clara. How exactly do you define an urban venture, and why is that specifically a part of your mission as opposed to like more broadly a social venture?
So many of the companies don't actively self-identify as social, either just because it's not how they think of themselves, or frankly because there's a lot of stigma in the financial markets around actively being social. You could say you're mission-driven, but if you say you're that's okay. But if you say you're a social enterprise, some people might be uncomfortable with that, or think that people might be uncomfortable with that. It just happens to be that urban problems are the problems that Julie and I personally care about. And we found that the thing they all had in common in terms of our selection, they were all developing consumer or business-facing products or services that solved problems that had been identified by many mayors in the US as major priorities, but that they hadn't necessarily been able to solve on their own. So many mayors will say things like, we support the implementation of universal preschool. But most preschools in the US are administered by private organizations, religious institutions, nonprofits. So being able to kind of manage that process and make it easier for working families, single moms, at-risk youth to be able to access these types of programs is tough for them. So we decided we would support Kid Admit, which is a common application for preschools, which aggregates all that information and allows you to apply online. Because right now, many of you aren't parents. I was not a parent, so I didn't realize this was such a thing. You physically have to show up to a preschool and fill out separate form for every single school. You have to physically drop off a paper check for the most part. You have no idea where you are in the process. And if you're a working parent, a single mom, like that's really beyond the realm. But at the same time, similar to Revolution Foods, they're really looking to solve the problem for all parents. And just to give you some context, there are 25 million applications submitted to college every year in the US, but there are 35 million applications submitted to preschool. So not only is this an important priority for mayors in terms of solving a social challenge, it is also a very scalable business. And so those are the types of problems we look to solve. I know that's kind of vague, but yeah, consumer and business facing. In particular, I would say we're really interested in business facing. And if you guys are thinking about solving a social enterprise, I would encourage you to look in that direction. I think most of the examples that we've talked about today are products and service, like they're like products like a, travel gear or food, but many of the most scalable solutions, frankly, are going to be business targeted solutions. So like the water utility solutions, the software as a service for something or other. So think about that, and that's sort of a priority for us.
Excellent. Okay, I think it's now lunch break. The panelists will stay up here for those of you that can delay your hunger to talk to you, answer additional questions. But thank you all very, very much for your attention and your interest in the topics, and thank you for the panelists and their contributions.